Welcome to the WNBA on NBC. I'm joined by Terrika Foster-Brasby, and we have a quick CBA update for you because it's just ongoing between the union and the league. Yesterday on Rivaled had their media availabilities, Terrika, and Napheesa Collier gave us an update on CBA negotiations, and she was specifically asked about unity amongst the players, and kind of like, because we know in negotiations as time wears on, sometimes everyone doesn't hold as strong. And so she was asked specifically about it, and here's what she had to say.
You guys are over a year into negotiations with the WNBA, and I'm curious how you would describe the level of unity within the union. If you feel like there's been any fatigue, or how you guys continue to stay on the same page. How would you describe that unity within the union?
I think it's been amazing. Just the player buy-in, the player participation, the unity in that. We all feel like we're in lockstep with what we want, what we're willing to do to get there. It's been amazing. I was not part of the last CBA, so I don't know what it is in comparison, but this has been awesome. And I think naturally, I don't think there's fatigue. Like, obviously there's frustrations in that both sides are trying to get what they want, but I think we still have that fire within us, and that we're willing to do what it takes, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get what we think we deserve. And so that fire keeps burning through that. And, our PA works really, really hard. The players have all been so engaged that I think it's really easy to stay in that space as well.
Okay, so that was Napheesa Collier saying that basically the WNBA, they're in lockstep, and they're going to continue to fight for what they want to fight for, and that continues to remain her stance. And we were talking earlier about A'ja Wilson's interview that she did for Time, and you brought up her comments about Kathy, and her quote was a really strong quote, and she said, "I only know Kathy by when she hands me trophies." If that's her true self, and she's referencing what Napheesa Collier alleged that she, remarks that she made about the players and Caitlin Clark, which she denied the Caitlin Clark part. But, A'ja went on to say, if that's her true self, thank you for showing that. Thank you for saying those things, because now we see you for who you are. And now we're about to work even harder at this negotiation. And, she also continued to just sort of state, like, in her sit down, when she was talking to Gail, that, they're going to keep going for what they want. So that sort of aligns with what Napheesa Collier is saying about them being in lockstep, and remaining unified. But maybe not, but I thought Caitlin Clark struck maybe a more conciliatory tone. She said, while the players will fight for everything we deserve next year. And so not really giving in, but just a little bit, I think, more conciliatory. So, but I still think that aligns with what Napheesa Collier said in the players being in lockstep. What are your thoughts on what Fee had to say?
Yeah, I completely agree with those thoughts, that it seems like no matter what player you ask, it seems like no matter in what system or arena or environment that you ask them in, all of their answers seem to align with the fact that they are all 100% in agreement that what the WNBA and what the league is offering in their counters to the proposals that the WNBA are making, that it is so far apart and distant for what would genuinely move the needle forward. And I do think that they are showing good faith negotiations by consistently extending the current negotiation to show that they do want to come to a resolution before next season. They do want to come to a resolution without having to pause the season, without having to go into a lockout, without having to strike. They want to come to a resolution. Like, It seems to be very obvious, but it also seems to be very obvious that they are not going to back down or give up. And I like that there seems to be solidarity across the WNBA as far as the players. It seems like there seems to be solidarity among the players. And I think that that is probably one of the biggest leverages that they can have. The moment that there becomes players who are willing to compromise a little bit differently than some of the other players in a public light or in a public standpoint, that's when you start to lose your leverage a little bit. That's when the league can kind of start to play on that a little bit, and it would not be unseen. We saw something like this previously in 2020 when there were players who some wanted to play, some didn't during the pandemic season. So we've kind of seen this before. And in the end, it worked out the way it was supposed to work out. But I like that even throughout all of this, the players still seem to be together and unified in their message to the league that they are still not where they need to be as it relates to this negotiation. And I know The Athletic just recently reported that the new proposal from the players is that they are now looking for 34% of the revenue sharing, and the league is still rejecting that proposal. And I don't know if like there are listeners who don't quite understand like what this means. But essentially the players are basically saying, listen, if you give me this agreed upon share and you take away the benefits like housing and travel and health insurance and whatever else becomes left, all of that is left is the salary cap. And let's divide that evenly among the teams. And the reason why this is important for people to understand is because this is what directly ties the players' pay to the league's growth. And that's what it seems like the WNBA, the league itself, is fighting against. And that, I think, is what's important to continue to remember.
Yeah, I mean, revenue share is, the big sticking point. Asia mentioned it, during her time interview. Napheesa talked about it yesterday, but there are other things that they want, but the revenue share is the big one. And in their proposal, the salary cap would be determined by taking the player's share of the previous season's total revenue, subtracting the cost of various player benefits, and dividing that number by the number of teams. That's per The Athletic. But they're just far apart because the league doesn't want to do that kind of revenue share split with the players. In the first year of the agreement, the players would receive 29% of the prior season's gross revenue with a one-time adjustment applied to reflect the WNBA's new 11-year, $2.2 billion media rights deal going into effect next season. And that seems, from my perspective, fair. Like, right, you want some kind of adjustment for that media rights deal. I don't think that's a crazy ask.
I agree 100%. I don't think that that is an unfair starting point. And then keeping in mind that after that, the share would increase 1% each season, which would probably top out around 34% by the end of the deal. And basically the players are just simply saying, we also need audits because if we're sharing revenue, we need full transparency on what these books looks like. And it looks like the league is saying, hey, we want to pay you, but we don't really want to pay you through this model, through this method. We don't really want to share our books because we've already shared it. We've already done this. I don't think the Players Association would be continually asking for documents and for transparency of something that they have already been given and have already been privy to. So again, you can just see that throughout this extension, which is a second extension from the original ending date, which was October 30th, they are still miles apart from where they need to be. I don't foresee this coming to any actual conclusions until maybe February of 2026. Some are saying January, but I think February. The last time they had a negotiation deal of this magnitude, which wasn't even of this magnitude, but still big for the league at that time, was in 2020, and they didn't get that done until mid-January of 2020. So
and they weren't as far apart.
And they weren't as far apart. So I see February being a timeline where this could actually see some type of conclusion. But I don't think what the players are proposing, according to The Athletic, is so far-fetched and unreasonable.
I don't either. Well, I'm sure there will be more to come, and we will stay on top of it. So make sure you are subscribed to our new YouTube channel, the WNBA on NBC, so you don't miss out. You can get these CBA updates. Thank you for tuning in. Terrika, thanks for joining me.
Of course.